Slumpbusters is your host, Juju Talk Sports, and my co-host, Kyle Ledbetter. There's nothing like a good rivalry in sports. Bears, Packers, Yankees, Red Sox, Duke, North Carolina. For the first time in NCAA tournament history, these two will square off. And no, it isn't a run-of-the-mill round of 64 game. No, it is the Final Four, no less. These teams have already played twice this season, splitting the season series. Joining us to talk this historic game and Final Four as a whole, not one, but two fantastic guests. Here to represent the UNC side, I got Blake Cockrum of Keeping It Hill on the fan side and network. Blake, scale of 1 to 10, what's your anxiety level heading into Saturday?
Somewhere around 400.
Well, we'll see if our other guest feels that same way. Playing Blue Devils advocate and to talk all things Duke, Ryan Lommen. Follow Ryan at the Duke Nation. Ryan, how are you feeling? One way or another, Coach K will coach his last game this week.
I'm at about the same level as Blake. The nerves are there. It's sad. It's emotional. It's all the above, man. It's crazy. I can't believe this is happening.
Okay, question for both of you in one sentence or less. Tell me, what does the Duke UNC rivalry mean to you?
For me, it's history. It goes back decades, but as of late, it's been like relevancy, right? Like anybody who knows or has been around the rivalry, the majority of the last couple decades, both of these teams have been relevant and power teams in the country. So I think for me, it's relevancy at this point.
Yeah, I think that this rivalry epitomizes greatness in a sport. And you can't talk about one without the other. You try to separate them, it doesn't make sense. Like these two programs are linked historically and linked forever. And a lot of that is due to the greatness of both programs. And whether you're a fan of one side or the other, you can't deny the greatness of the other. So I may be a big Carolina fan, but Duke is a fantastic program. And I guarantee Ryan would say the opposite as well. It's just greatness.
Ryan, like I mentioned, it's Coach K's last week coaching the Duke Blue Devils. Can you talk about what Coach K means to this program and his legacy in basketball as a whole?
Yeah, I think for Coach K, his impact on basketball it goes beyond just Duke. It goes to obviously USA basketball, but Coach K is Duke. Like there was really, I mean, they had some decent teams before he showed up more than 42 years ago, but he is Duke basketball. You think of Coach K, you think of Duke, you think of Coach K. So to think that like no matter what happens, this is the final week we get to talk about Coach K being the head coach, it's crazy, man. Like, and then it's hard to put into words like what this week feels like. The last few weeks have obviously there's been a possibility of it being his last week, but I also kind of like this because it's all right. Now there's time to prepare. Like we know Saturday it possibly could happen, but for sure by Monday or Tuesday, the gig is up and it's Jon Scheyer's team immediately after the final game of the season.
So Blake, on the flip side for Carolina, Roy Williams retired, I think it was in the middle of April last year. So they already had the roster for next year. The transfer portal had gone through. And in his first year, Hubert Davis is taking them to a Final Four. He's going to start bringing in his own recruits in the next couple of years. So what do you make of what's gone down in the first year for North Carolina as a building block for the program, moving off of a massively successful coach in Roy Williams, who, retires pretty much on the spot, and Hubert Davis takes over and goes to the Final Four?
I mean, obviously you can't be upset as a Carolina fan in the totality of the season. I mean, they are in the Final Four. There's absolutely no Carolina fan that's going to say, okay, this wasn't a successful season. Now, how did they get to that point? Obviously there were some concerns early on, and even halfway, even 3/4 of the way through the season, people wondering, is this the guy? They've lost every big game they've played in. They've been absolutely destroyed in a handful of them. There were some growing pains, and there were a number of fans that questioned whether or not Hubert would be around for a while. Now that's still in question. I mean, he could completely fall on his face next year. I don't look for that to happen, but it has been an up and down roller coaster ride of a season. And anybody who is filling that big of shoes, I mean, wait for it. Like Ryan, right off the bat next year, you already know if Jon Scheyer struggles, people are going to be upset. And like, it doesn't matter whose shoes you're trying to fill. If they're as good as a Coach K, a Roy Williams, a Dean Smith, any of these people. Like I fear for the next person at Kansas that tries to come in there after Bill Self. They're terribly hard on the coach, but ultimately it's been a fantastic season. This team has galvanized and come together incredibly well. They've played great basketball the past 3 to 4 weeks, and they're in the Final Four because of it.
I do want to feed off that real quick, and this is more of a question for Blake, but if I remember right, Hubert also wasn't not fan favorite, but he wasn't like an all consensus pick. Like everybody was on the Hubert Davis bandwagon when he was hired, correct? That's safe to say.
Absolutely. absolutely. And there were a million names out there, and some of them weren't even logical. Like people wanted Mark Few. Okay, like Mark Few's got a great gig. Okay, and like him and Roy Williams are like really good buddies.
Yeah.
And the chance that you're going to get him to come from Spokane, where he's got a program that wins 30 games every single year, competes for a national title every single year. He has the key to that state. Like the fact that like he wasn't going to come, right? And then they started throwing around like Billy Donovan, throwing around all these other names that just didn't really make sense. The thing that mattered most, obviously, in the hiring was that Roy Williams handpicked this man.
Mm-hmm.
The fans didn't necessarily agree, but nobody really cared what the fans thought. And to this point, did they struggle to get to where they got to? Yes, but their tournament run has been rather impressive. They blew out Marquette. They did blow a big lead against Baylor, but still beat a number 1 seed. They topped UCLA. They beat the Cinderella that was beating everybody in its path. And so the fans weren't certain. I would say they're much more certain and comfortable now.
So these teams, like I mentioned earlier, they split the season series. UNC got the most recent victory. What about that last game do you think can translate, Blake, to this upcoming matchup?
The most important thing to me is the expectations. The pressure, and people will argue this, the pressure is all on Duke again. The pressure wasn't on North Carolina in that first matchup, and here's why. You've got 100 alumni in the stands that are watching the game. Every single one of them expects a win. You've got 9,000 fans. Every single one of them expects a win. Not one of those fans think that they're leaving that arena that night as the losing team. Not one of them. The Tar Heels came in and they played loose. They shot well. They got to the free throw a bunch of times. They marginally won the rebounding battle. Like they looked really, really good. They looked like a team that was playing loose. Similarly, no one expected North Carolina to be in the Final Four. Not one single person. Okay. People were saying they were going to get out in the first round. There's no way they get past Baylor. Duke was supposed to be here. Kansas was supposed to be here. A lot of people picked Villanova to be here. North Carolina, I don't like to say that a team's playing with house money because obviously they're this far, like you want to win, but the pressure is not on North Carolina in this game.
Ryan, on the other side.
Yeah, like I agree to the point you made, but I also think that after last game, I don't think there's definitely not as much pressure on Duke. And I think you can make an argument that there's a little bit of pressure that favors North Carolina after you went into Cameron, you spoiled Coach K's last game. But I said it after that game happened on our show that if we go in and win the national title, that's wiped out. That's fine. That's all as well. And especially now if you beat North Carolina in the Final Four, that's all wiped out. So I think on the North Carolina side, there was some social media trash talking. Obviously, these guys all know each other. They're no strangers to one another, especially on social media. So I think there's some talk that needs to be backed up. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for from the Duke side as a motivational factor. And like you said, Blake, there's not the alumni. There's really not even the camera and the medias that were around all week. Like I was told that Duke hardly practiced that week. There was media involvement in everything they were doing. So the pressure is definitely less, which is weird because this game is like, you could argue is bigger than that game, especially in terms of this season. So I think the pressure's even, but I would probably give a little bit more pressure to the North Carolina side to back up that performance in Cameron.
To get to this point, what have you seen so far in this tournament, this road to the Final Four for Duke that gives you confidence in this game?
Yeah, I think it's the consistency on the defensive side. This team against North Carolina, against Virginia Tech, even against Syracuse in the ACC tournament, they didn't look great. They couldn't defend the three ball. A big reason why North Carolina won that game is because RJ Davis and Caleb Love could shoot the ball. It was known coming into this tournament that we couldn't defend the three. Now, I will say we haven't played any teams that shoot the three all that well outside of maybe Michigan State, but the defensive side has definitely been locked up a little bit more than it was the last few weeks of the season. And then you're just getting more consistent, more dominant play from Mark Williams in the post, and also Paulo Banchero has played a lot better now than he did to end the season. So what I'm holding on to is that this team shows up at the biggest moments, which they did at the beginning of the season against Gonzaga and Kentucky. And now they're doing it in the NCAA tournament. So that's what I'm hoping for.
And then Blake, on the North Carolina side, you mentioned the games earlier, whether the Baylor game where Manick gets ejected and UCLA where Love kind of has a big game and another game it's Baycott. And they've kind of had an interesting run so far. So how has the Cinderella type of feel for North Carolina been a different type of vibe for North Carolina going deep in the tournament?
Yeah, well, in recent history, other than the 2000 Final Four appearance where they got to the Final Four as an 8 seed. Typically, if North Carolina is this far in the tournament, they're expected to be. You look at years like 2008, 2009, 2012 when they fell just shy with the Kendall Marshall injury, even in 2016 with Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson, 2017 when they won the title. All these years, they were expected to be in the Final Four. And most of those years when they get a top seed, that's pretty much where they end up. Usually when they have a little bit of an off season, they don't make it this far. The thing that I've liked most about the tournament run is their ability to face adversity and actually play well in the face of it, because that's what they struggled through most of the season. They got punched in the mouth early against, Tennessee, Kentucky, even the first Duke game, and didn't really show a whole lot of fight after that. You just kind of saw a team that was just this fledgling thing that, was down, 10 or 12 points, nothing insurmountable, but then it just snowballed. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, we've seen them just steamroll Marquette, get into a situation where, I'll leave out the officiating factor in the Baylor game, where the Baylor does catch all the way up. It goes into overtime. And based on everything you've seen the whole season, you're thinking, wow, can they even win this? Immediately overtime starts. You get a 3-pointer out of Dontrez Styles. They play lockdown defense and they keep scoring and they walk away with the win. UCLA, a close game. They faced adversity and they've been beating it, the last couple of weeks. And that's the thing I'm most optimistic about. You come out here, you play Duke tough to start the game. In the second half, as long as it's close, anything can happen in this rivalry.
It's easy to get lost in this game. This is obviously the marquee game of the weekend. No disrespect to Kansas, Villanova, but regardless of who gets this victory, they still got one more game to play. So Blake, I got to ask you, coming out of that other side of the bracket, who are you most worried about? Who do you think is going to come out of that side of the bracket? What type of matchup advantages or disadvantages will North Carolina have in that matchup?
I think this matchup is for the national championship. I think the team that comes out of this game wins it all. And I say that because I think that both teams are going to match up well with the winner, who I expect will be Kansas, because Villanova is down an important player, which is really bad for them. If it wasn't for 2016, I might feel bad for him. But I truly think that the way, and now, of course, if one of these teams come out and just lays an egg, then that totally changes. But the way that these teams are playing, to Ryan's point about the defensive end for Duke, and the way that North Carolina has been playing offensively, we're talking about a team that couldn't hit the ocean with a stone for 2 years from 3-point range, is now one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the nation. Twice this season against Duke, they've hit 9 threes, and that was a big part of that second win, was the 9 threes. And their accuracy from the free throw line, they were 19 of 22 in that second game against Duke. That was a big part of winning that game. These teams are really firing on all cylinders right now. Duke had a little bit of a scary game against Michigan State, but right when it got close, they did what they needed to do, got over the hump, they won it. I really think that the national champion comes out of this game.
Ryan, what do you think about the Kansas-Villanova matchup?
Yeah, I agree. Justin Moore being out is just tough for them, man. I have nothing against Villanova, so that sucked. I was kind of hoping that they'd be able to get past Kansas, because I'm just anti-Kansas, as the blue blood conversations for a different time. But I think Kansas is a fellow blue blood in this Final Four. I didn't want to see them in the title game, but yeah, I ultimately think it comes down to Kansas. The one thing I am worried about is, I know, Blake, you said that you think the national championship comes from this game, but I think not the letdown, but like all that's going to be surrounding this, and then you have one day to prepare and one day to refocus and be like, we got to go win one more basketball game against a really good probably Kansas team. That's tough to do. And I think both teams have the talent to do it. It's just a matter of the mental focus and fortitude to turn around and be like, all right, we got one more. The job's not done, because as great of a victory as it could be on a Saturday for one of these programs, it could be just as big of a letdown on Monday if you don't show up.
Hollywood can wrote a better ending. All right, guys, Ryan Lommen, Blake Cockrum, thank you guys for joining us so much. Blake, you want to start off with some obligatory plugs where we can find some more of your content?
Yeah, at Keeping It Heel on Twitter and keepingitheel.com. We are releasing countless articles day after day after day. Everything from obviously tournament coverage and live game, tweeting and articles, to recruiting. The transfer portal right now is incredibly busy, so we're covering all of that as well.
Ryan, same to you.
Yeah, I'm at the Duke Nation on Twitter, and then I host a show with myself and Duke NBA on Twitter, and we call it Crazy Twitter Live. We'll be live at least after the game on Saturday, and then maybe once before. So check us out. It's a lot of fun to interact with the fans and get people's thoughts after the game. If
you want a front row Twitter seat to see the bad blood between these two between the next couple days, go ahead and follow both these gentlemen here. Thank you for watching Juju Talk Sports. Kyle Ledbetter, stay safe, happy, and healthy, and we'll see you on the next one.